Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Friday, October 25th, and I'm Carrie Clark, Board Chair of the Deaconess Foundation. I am pleased to introduce today's forum, which is in partnership with the Deaconess Foundation in honor of the 4th annual Deborah Vesy Systems Change Champion Award. Deborah Vesy was a longtime president and CEO of the foundation. She retired in 2020, and in honor of her leadership, this award is given annually to a highly impactful systems change or innovation initiative in workforce. Earlier today, Deaconess announced this year's award winner, Collaborate Cleveland. Please join me in congratulating them. Systems change in the workforce system is the result of collective efforts of employers, service providers, educators, labor leaders, policymakers, and many other stakeholders. All improve both how people are able to build careers and how our employers fill their good jobs. One of the most important stakeholders I mentioned is policymakers. It is with this in mind we welcome Ms. Pronita Gupta to the City Club. Ms. Gupta is currently a senior fellow at Workshop, where she focuses on labor and worker rights issues. Prior to this role, Ms. Gupta served in the Biden White House as Special Assistant to the President for Labor and Workers on the Domestic Policy Council. Throughout her extensive career, she's used her expertise in developing policies, conducting research, and community and labor organizing to strengthen policy solutions which create more responsive workplaces, improve quality for workers, strengthen worker protections, and increase economic security for low-income working families. If you have a question for our speaker, you can text it to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. And City Club staff will try to work it into the Q&A portion of the program. Members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming Pronita Gupta.
Thank you. Well, I want to say a very big thank you to the City Club of Cleveland, especially to Cynthia Connolly and to Kathy Belk of the Deaconess Foundation for inviting me today. I'm really honored to be able to speak at today's 4th annual Deborah Vesy Systems Change Champion Award Forum. I also have had many Cleveland-based community, labor, and philanthropic and organizational leaders to thank because they spent their time, their insights, and expertise as I was putting this talk together. And I really do hope I do some justice to some of the important issues that you raised in your conversations with me. Last but not least, I want to congratulate Collaborate Cleveland on winning this meaningful award, and thank you for the vital work you're leading on gender justice. Actually, the interconnection and collaborations that are the strategy you're creating for a more just and equitable Cleveland are at the heart of my talk today. Sorry, a little technical difficulty here. So driving around Cleveland yesterday and today really reminded me of home. I too come from a vibrant city on a great lake that was once a prosperous manufacturing center, and that's also faced significant hardships since deindustrialization in the 1980s and 1990s. I grew up in Rochester, New York, on the banks of Lake Ontario, and in its heyday, it was known as Kodak City. Almost everyone I knew growing up either worked for Kodak, Xerox, or Bausch & Lomb. These companies created thousands of good-paying jobs that employed generations of families. Their decline not only hit Rochester's economy, but it actually really hurt its psyche and its identity. Rochester, like Cleveland, has rebuilt itself as a center for healthcare and other growing industries, but like Cleveland, it continues to grapple with its identity and the growing economic divide between its more affluent and mostly white suburbs and its economically distressed inner cities that happen to be predominantly Black and brown. So inclusive economic development focused on three critical sectors: business, workforce, and the community, is critical for both these cities. Successful economic development strategies invest and coordinate across all three of these sectors. The Investing in America suite of historic new federal legislation, which includes the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act, is poised to deliver over $1 trillion, and trillion with a T, in new investments in states and localities to accelerate the transition to a green economy, rebuild our aging infrastructure, and to strengthen critical supply chains. I'm most interested in seeing how these historic investments can be used to reshape the economies of cities like Cleveland and Rochester by creating good union jobs, ensuring equity, meaning that underserved communities have a greater access to these good jobs, and meeting vital community needs while growing new businesses. That's why I believe partnerships and the creation of effective and durable coalitions are key to meeting this moment. So I want to get a sense of this room, and so I'm going to ask a few questions and ask people to just raise their hands. How many of you here work in the private sector? Okay, quite a few hands. See about 6 or 7. How many of you work in the nonprofit sector? Ooh, we have quite the nonprofit sector. Vast majority of this room, fantastic. How many of you work in philanthropy? See quite a few hands here, about 5 or 6. How many of you work for a union or a worker organization? Ooh, only 1. Hopefully we'll see more in the future. In government? No one in government right now. Well, this is really helpful for me. How many of you have been part of a coalition effort that has achieved its goals? Raise your hand. Okay, this is good. I see quite a few hands. I'd say about 10 or so. This is really helpful for me to see. And I want you all to look around the room because your next coalition partner may be sitting at a table across from you. In my talk, I'm going to focus on 3 points. Why building diverse coalitions are a critical component in growing resilient local economies. How coalitions can help localities impact or access the Investing in America investments. And what does this actually mean and look like for Cleveland? So why build coalitions? To build a good economy and build a skilled workforce and meet community needs, you need to do more than just bring diverse groups together for the sake of connecting. These groups need to be able to develop a shared agenda and build the power to win the changes they want. This means creating relationships across sectors, geographies, and communities. It also means in order to be durable and impactful on hard-to-solve problems, coalitions must be structured as long-term strategic alliances rather than short-term tactical partnerships. However, building an effective, durable coalition is hard work. Yet Cleveland is actually ahead of the game since you have a history of coalition building here. And these coalitions have been able to win meaningful policies that make a difference in your communities, such as the 2022 wage theft ordinance. I also know this firsthand. I worked for many years as a community and labor organizer and researcher in Los Angeles. And a few years before I got there, a set of labor unions and community organizations, especially those representing Black and brown communities, realized they had to join forces in order to win any significant economic and social change in their city. This required 4 critical elements: building trust, learning to work together, understand each other's issues, histories, and struggles. It also means showing up for each other's campaigns or fights. It also means developing processes to disagree with each other while not harming the overall agenda and the goals of the coalition. Power building, which is so key in developing a shared long-term agenda for economic and social change. This requires identifying and prioritizing common needs, assessing and mapping the coalition's assets, current power, and potential weaknesses, and using this information to develop a realistic set of goals to reach that vision. Being inclusive, bringing new partners into the coalition, and being effective, learning and being willing to transform wins and losses into updated goals and strategies, learning to be nimble. So this didn't happen in a few weeks, months, or even years. It was an ongoing and often challenging process, but it worked. The work of the Los Angeles Coalition led to passing living wage ordinance that improved the economic security of thousands of workers. It helped restructure the workforce development program to better reach underserved communities. It redistributed workforce dollars to create new training pipelines into healthcare, clean energy, and public sector jobs, while also providing critical support services. It also passed effective community benefit agreements that have been win-wins for developers, labor unions, and communities, and have helped the city restructure and reprioritize its economic agenda. And the work of LA continues through existing and new coalitions. Now, while my example is from community and labor organizing, I think the lessons and the core elements are the same for building diverse and durable coalitions across businesses, government, labor, communities, educational institutions, the public workforce system, and philanthropies, especially now in order to unlock the full benefits of the historic federal investments flowing into our communities. You can really do this. How can coalitions help localities impact or access the Investing in America investments? When I was still in the Biden-Harris administration, I was part of a team charged with trying to find ways to embed stronger equity, labor standards, and workforce development provisions into the implementation of the Investing in America laws. Really smart people in the federal agencies were able to go much further and incorporate stronger provisions that also provide critical levers to facilitate coalition building. Some of these include Justice 40, which ensures that 40% of the overall benefits of these federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities, and that these communities that have often been overlooked and overburdened by pollution can actually thrive and benefit. Direct pay. It's a program that allows tax-exempt entities such as cities and nonprofit organizations to receive tax credits for investing in clean energy projects as direct funds or almost reimbursements from the IRS for the full or partial costs of the project. So what this can look like is, say, a city decides to place solar panels on city-owned stadium and uses the savings from these clean energy investments to increase the pay for stadium workers or to create a workforce fund for the community to increase access to good jobs. Another program is the community change grants that are part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is overseen by the Environmental Protection Agency. These grants are funding projects that reduce pollution, increase community climate resilience, and build community capacity to respond to environmental and climate challenges. These grants can also be used for advocacy at the state and local level, and is only available to nonprofits or partnerships between nonprofits and local governments. Planning grants, I know many of you have worked on these, in transportation, broadband, and water infrastructure programs. childcare requirements in the semiconductor manufacturing investments, requiring any company that receives more than $150 million in subsidies to provide high-quality, affordable, accessible childcare to their construction and manufacturing workers. This provides an opportunity to work with employers to build and support the local childcare ecosystem. And my favorite, the Department of Energy is requiring funding applicants for clean energy and infrastructure programs to develop community benefit plans, or what I'm going to call CBPs as a shorthand, in partnership with communities and labor unions. This counts for these CBPs count for 20% of their applications. And if that company is selected for funding, they must implement this CBP. The Department of Energy is also urging many of these companies to take these CBPs and make them into legally binding agreements in the form of community benefits agreements, project labor agreements, and collective bargaining agreements with unions. And as all of you know, since Cleveland actually has a community benefits ordinance in place to ensure developers and communities work together to create equitable development projects, community benefit agreements, or CBAs, can really be a win-win for employers, communities, workers, and local government. For communities, labor and local government, CBAs can help decrease the energy costs for low-income households, increase the creation of quality jobs, and build the clean energy pipeline, provide funding for training and workforce development, include access for local disadvantaged hiring and worker retention, ensure environmental mitigations, allow for community monitoring of the project, and even support other local community needs, such as creating a local community housing fund. For employers, CBAs can help ensure smoother siting and permitting on the local level for their project, labor peace for the project's construction and operations, timely completion and implementation of the project, which we know, time is money, and a skilled and ready workforce. So let me give you an example of an effective community benefits agreement. Stand Up Nashville is a coalition of community, faith-based, and labor organizations in Nashville, and they won a historic community benefits agreement on a soccer stadium project in 2018. As part of this CBA, the community was able to win from the developer some of the following commitments: affordable housing, a livable wage for all direct stadium hires, funding for a childcare facility, targeted hiring and training focused on individuals with barriers to employment, inclusion of minority contractors, and a community advisory committee to oversee the implementation of this community benefits agreement. What developers won was an ease in the permitting process, a trained and ready workforce for the construction of the stadium, a trained and ready workforce for the operations jobs, the ability to keep the project on time and on budget without delays, and much stronger relationship with the community, labor, and local government that can actually translate into potential future partnerships on projects. But all this required effective coalitions with strong relationships and the power and capacity to get to this win-win agreement. Again, effective coalition with strong relationships and the power and capacity to get to this win-win agreement. My team at Workshop has provided technical assistance to a number of clean energy businesses about how to use and implement the Department of Energy's community benefits plan requirements. These businesses are what I would call union-curious employers who actually want to know how to use community benefit agreements and what it means to work with organized labor and community. They want to better understand how project labor agreements and community benefit agreements work and how it can actually benefit them. Some have gone so far as to sign project labor agreements and neutrality agreements with labor unions. The harder part of our technical assistance has often been identifying community partners that fully represent the breadth and diversity of a given location. In order to fully realize the goals underlying these federal investments of creating good jobs, equity, and positive community impacts, employers need to be able to negotiate with organized, inclusive coalitions. Sadly, in many states and localities, being selected for these investments, such coalitions are far and few. This means that the potential economic benefits of these major investments will not equitably be shared across the diverse constituencies that comprise these communities. The Department of Energy has identified the need for strong partnerships, especially between clean energy businesses, unions, and communities, as integral to ensuring projects funded by the Department of Energy are completed on time and on budget. To facilitate this, the Department of Energy has recently announced that it's piloting a new initiative called Community Workforce Readiness Accelerator for Major Projects. It's a mouthful, or otherwise we just call it RAMP, that has three major objectives: to build local workforce capacity, to connect workers to jobs and remove barriers to opportunities, and to provide skills training for in-demand jobs. Core to this initiative are 10 fellows the DOE has selected and funded in 10 locations. Again, these are people from within the community who have gotten these to become these fellows. And the funding and these fellows are going to places where there are significant public and private investments for clean energy infrastructure and supply chain projects. These fellows are tasked with supporting labor, community, and employer collaborations with the end goal of developing and implementing strategic workforce partnerships in these select communities. The list of fellows are still being finalized, but Ohio was on the original list of potential geographies, so stay tuned. So what does this mean for Cleveland? As of August of this year, the Investing in America investments have yielded $14.2 billion in public investments in clean energy, infrastructure, and manufacturing in the state. It has also helped leverage approximately $43 billion in private sector investments. These include $15 million to the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency to design and build electric vehicle charging stations at 70 public and accessible locations throughout the 5-county region. I see a lot of nodding heads. Have any of you been part of that? See a few hands. $130 million to the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority to buy 60 new light rail and heavy rail vehicles that would replace older vehicles, and $129 million in funding to a partnership between Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, and Painesville to deploy a solar installation and battery storage on former brownfields and landfill sites that will help the region transition away from a coal-fired power plant in Northeast Ohio. It is very exciting. Good job, all of you, for putting these ideas out there and getting them funded. Additionally, one of the main goals of our current industrial policies is to spur the development of new supply chains in the near future to these communities that are actually receiving these significant public and private clean energy and manufacturing investments. Cleveland, with its long history and experience in heavy industries and the automotive sector, seem like a natural location for siting near future supply chain ventures. Again, having strong, inclusive, and organized coalitions with a shared agenda can be a real asset for attracting these types of economic growth opportunities. And again, Cleveland already has experience building strong coalitions and collaborations, such as the Built Environment Collaborative being led by Ohio Means jobs, the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Workforce Development Board. Michelle, you want to wave? With the goal of training and placing more community residents, especially from underserved communities of color and women, into good jobs. Or the Cleveland Water Alliance, I don't know if anyone's here from there, which is focused on building the freshwater economy for this region by supporting business innovations, technology, research, and the creation and training for good regional water technology industry jobs. So you already have in place models that can be used to facilitate building effective, durable coalitions between labor, community, government, and business. Another important strategy that's focused on collaborations and workforce development are sector-based training partnerships, which I know Cleveland has some experience with. So sector-based training partnerships are programs where employers, unions, community-based organizations, workforce systems, the higher education institutions in the area come together to train people into high-demand sectors with career advancement opportunities and a commitment to place people into actual jobs. These programs ensure that trainees have wraparound services that they need, including a wage or a stipend to be able to successfully start and complete their training. And then they're actually placed in quality jobs that don't require four-year college degrees, but allow workers to get locally recognized credentials or certification. These programs have traditionally been targeted for underserved communities, though actually they can also be used for reskilling and upskilling workers, especially workers who are in industries that are in decline or changing. The secret sauce to this proven strategy is the collaboration that has been formed between all these parties and that all these parties have skin in the game. I know Cleveland recently won a sector-based training partnership grant from the Department of Commerce under the Inflation Reduction Act. The $5 million grant from the NOAA Climate Ready Workforce Initiative will fund climate-ready workforce to manage the impacts of climate change on water resources in Ohio's coastal communities. The collaboration includes a community college, local utility services, community and historically Black colleges and universities, and employers. It will train climate-ready workers, including technicians, scientists, and engineers, to fulfill the specialized workforce needs of the water industry in the Great Lakes. The training and skills development will include water quality monitoring and modeling, geographic information systems, stormwater infrastructure, and environmental policy and management. I do want to say that the most impactful examples of this strategy also include organized labor and worker organizations in the mix. While the focus of my talk has been on the clean energy, manufacturing, and infrastructure economies, I want to take a minute to discuss the care economy, which I know is near and dear to many of you. The care economy, which includes childcare and direct care, is the work that makes all other work possible. As you know, these are the jobs that undergird the rest of our economy. We know that one of the key drivers of labor shortages during and after the pandemic, and continuing today, is the lack of quality and affordable care. Recent research shows that between 9 and 26 million hours of potential work are lost due to childcare problems in any given week. This translates to a staggering billion hours. These are tremendous losses for families, for workers, and for employers. The care economy itself is a $6 trillion sector, which comprises approximately a quarter of US GDP. However, many of these jobs are low-wage jobs with few or no benefits, lacking career advancement opportunities, and they are predominantly held by women, especially women of color. While I was in the Biden-Harris administration, we focused on affordability, accessibility, and making sure such care jobs were good jobs through Build Back Better, which eventually passed the House but got stalled in the Senate. Some of the provisions in this included capping the cost of childcare, expanding the American Rescue Plan's child tax credit, which was responsible for lifting 2.9 million children out of poverty, establishing a universal paid family medical leave program so workers didn't have to make a choice between a paycheck that they really need and being able to care for a loved one or to take care of their own illness. Expanding and improving Medicare coverage for home and community-based services for low-income seniors and people with disabilities, and making high-quality care more affordable and accessible. And most importantly, improving the working conditions and the pay for home care workers and child care workers, including expanding workforce training opportunities. While we were unable to get this over the finish line through legislation, the Biden-Harris administration has been able to move a number of these provisions forward through executive actions. But more can be actually done on the local and state level to support these essential workers and grow this critical economic sector. Cleveland, with its robust healthcare industry, can be a leader in driving these changes forward for this very important economic sector. But effective coalitions will be instrumental in driving this work. I want to give another shout out to Collaborate Cleveland, which is building a coalition to pass a statewide paid family medical leave law. Yay! So my first call to action for all of you in the room, especially for Cleveland labor unions, worker organizations, community and advocacy groups, businesses, and the local government, should be part of this coalition to pass this much-needed standard that has the potential of helping millions of workers in the state and subsequently the state's economy. So, how does the work of local coalitions translate on the national level? I'm going to end with one more story from my time in federal government. When I was the deputy director of the Women's Bureau in the Department of Labor during the Obama administration, we were working really hard to try to pass a national paid family medical leave law while also supporting states that were trying to do the same. At that time, there were only 3 states that had paid family medical leave laws in place. A coalition of national advocacy groups in coordination with state paid leave coalitions, labor unions, and small businesses met with us and proposed modest investments in paid family medical leave research and simulation modeling so that states could better determine the cost and benefits of these programs in their states. The small grant program of $3 million and along with strategic organizing by paid family medical leave coalitions on the state level, has led to the adoption of paid family medical leave laws in 13 states, including the District of Columbia. These coalitions, this national coalition along with all the state and local coalitions, were instrumental in driving the paid family medical leave investments that we were trying to make through Build Back Better. So local coalitions matter and they can impact national policy. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with a call to action. Join an existing coalition or help build a coalition to go after some of the federal investments I've discussed. Make sure these coalitions are diverse and committed to developing a shared agenda, and most importantly, committed to building power for workers and communities that will grow the economy. And since many of you raised your hand earlier in my talk, now's the time after this forum for all of you to start connecting, if you haven't already, and making the change you want to see happen in Cleveland possible. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
All right, we are about to begin the audience Q&A. For our live stream and radio audience, or those just joining, I'm Cynthia Connolly, Director of Programming here at the City Club. We are joined by Pronita Gupta, Senior Fellow at Workshop, which is focused on labor and worker rights issues, and we are talking about the role of coalitions and partnerships in rebuilding the economy. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, as well as those joining via our live stream at cityclub.org or our live radio broadcast at 89.7 IdeaStream Public Media. If you'd like to text a question for our speaker, please text it to 330-541-5794. Again, that's 330-541-5794, and City Club staff will try our best to work it into the program. Can we have our first question, please?
Yes, we're going to start with one of the text questions we've already received. You had mentioned power building. Right now, Cleveland, as well as the nation, is in the middle of a sea change in leadership that is trending younger, with Gen X and millennials taking up these roles. How do you see dynamics of power changing, particularly with regards to workforce policy with this new era? How can we capitalize on any of the changes?
That's a great question. I think coalitions in communities should be doing more to reach out to young people. Sadly, the infrastructure for youth organizing is pretty frayed. I actually come out of the student movement. I used to work for the U.S. The United States Student Association. That's where I met my husband, who's sitting in the audience. And we were advocating for greater access to higher education, which meant better, more affordable colleges, having more grants to be able to afford colleges, restructuring loan programs so that they weren't expensive and actually let people get the education they needed without going into debt, as well as many social programs such as welfare policy, labor policy, the Violence Against Women Act. We worked on all of it. Sadly, that organization no longer exists. And that is true across the country. There used to be much stronger youth movements. Many of them have been defunded and shut down. And we need to be able to invest, for those of you in philanthropy, to invest in those organizations and in the youth. And for labor organizations and other social justice organizations to bring young people along. They should be part of not only your organizing strategy, but they should also be part of your staff. So I think that there are great opportunities to make sure young people are part of these sorts of coalitions, because they need to be part of setting the agenda, but they're also going to be inheriting the future agenda, and they need to have the skills and capacity to be in it and to lend their voice now, because we need to know what they need and want for the future.
So we have another text question for you. Can you discuss the leadership of good coalitions? Is there one leader, a group, a consultant, and how does that evolve over a multi-year coalition?
That's a fantastic question. So coalitions are effective when there are strong organizations. This is not an area where we're just trying to create cults of personality. I know there are strong, effective people who lead these organizations, but strong, effective organizations are going to be the ones standing if that leader moves on to a different opportunity. So it has to be a set of organizations. I don't think you want one organization. One organization may play a facilitating role or organizing the meetings, scheduling them, but it actually takes more than one organization to be the leadership in an effective coalition. So some of the effective coalitions I've been in, we've always had many, many people involved, many organizations involved, but there's usually a core group of 5 to 10 organizations who are the leadership structure, who are helping to drive the work, but are then responsible for bringing it back to their own organizations and bringing that insight back into the core group. So that's what makes effective coalitions, is to have effective organizations and have a group of organizations in the leadership structure. And you can be multi-year because you're not just coming together on a one-off issue. You have to come together to build a longer term agenda. There may be an opportunity because of an immediate need. you want to apply for one of these greenhouse gas reduction fund community change grants. Great. But use that opportunity to come together to develop a much longer term transformative agenda. And that could be one of the first steps in it. Because you also want wins. We know that we can envision the world we want, and it's going to take time to get there. And you can't say, like, that's all, it's that or bust. You have to have wins along the way for community, for workers, for businesses, for government, to feel that we're making a difference and we're taking the necessary steps to get to that vision.
Enjoyed your presentation. I had a quick question, and it's might be vague, but anything you want to share about it would be great. I know you grew up in Rochester. You mentioned Bausch and Lomb and Kodak and Xerox, and you probably have a strong understanding of the public-private nonprofit coordination with all that. We have Intel coming outside of Columbus, and there's going to be a lot involved with that. So it's revolutionary in a lot of ways. Groundbreaking, biggest microchip company or manufacturing plant in the world. So if you could share anything about how you envision public, private, nonprofit coordination with that. And like I say, it's a vague question, but I'd just love to hear your insights. Thank you.
No, I think that's a great question. Let's use Intel as an example, right? So as I mentioned, the CHIPS program is requiring semiconductor manufacturers to ensure that their workforce has affordable, accessible childcare. This is a great opportunity for business, government, labor, community groups to come together to really figure out how to do this effectively. Many communities already have robust childcare ecosystems. You don't want a big private employer to come in and, basically tip over that apple cart, So here's a chance to inform and educate the employer about what's available already and how to build more, how to invest in it. So there are real opportunities to do that. And once you start that sort of engagement, there are opportunities to continue into other areas, like many of the semiconductor industry will need supply chain, will need additional companies built to meet its supply needs. What companies are available? How can community, labor, the business community, the government, the workforce system come together to think about what those businesses can look like? What kind of training needs to be put in place sooner versus later? What sorts of incentives, whether it's coming from the federal government or from the state, can these groups come together with their shared agenda and go after? And helping businesses to do that as long as they are good employers, supporting unions, supporting the community, and not destroying our environment. I think there's a way to think about how to do all this and engage employers, because it's a win-win strategy for them and for communities.
So we have another text question. Our most significant resource in workforce development is our public K-12 education system. How can the private and nonprofit sectors best partner with schools, and how can districts best open themselves up to partners and coalitions?
That is a really great question, something I love, because I think that the K-12 system is underutilized. There's a lot of talk about STEM programs, even throughout these big pieces of federal legislation, but it's actually going to happen on the local level. And I think there are many ways to do it. I think it's rethinking our career and technical education programs at the middle school and high school level, finding strategic partnerships. I know that in a number of parts of the country, the building trades have been able to partner with high schools to offer their pre-apprenticeship program to help build pipelines into the building trades for all these infrastructure dollars coming out. So I think that there's opportunities to do that across the board in many different programs, because getting young people engaged in understanding these jobs and getting them to have opportunities, whether it's through youth employment programs, apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships, all of that will help build sort of the workforce for tomorrow. And I think, again, it's a all-together approach. We need everyone. So we need school districts working with employers, working with labor unions, working with community organizations, especially in the communities where these schools are. Those are parents who have jobs, who want their kids to have better futures. So, and government and the workforce system, which I will say again is so crucial because the workforce system already has in place programs that they can connect people to or can help bring together to innovate around.
People are busy on their texting today. So we have another text question. We're about to have a new president and team who will have a new or evolving agenda. How do you recommend Cleveland get on the radar of this team to help this team know our challenges and opportunities?
So, I mean, I think you're already doing a lot of this. But I think when you have an organized agenda that, that is a shared agenda, it's much easier. If you have a shared agenda and you're working with your city government, and one thing that I think has been really effective, this is more once a government is in place, and I was sharing this with Gina yesterday, listening sessions, bringing the federal government, bringing people from the White House, from the federal agencies, to come and meet with community, with labor, with businesses, with local government agencies, to really learn more about these opportunities, what they have in plan, what you would like to see. And these investments are going to be continuing. I mean, some may get changed somewhat, but a lot of this money is still flowing. And many of these programs are just in their early stages. So it's still time to give feedback to federal agencies to say what's working, what's not working, what you need more of. So I think there's an agenda setting that needs to happen at the local level, and then engaging the new administration. And I think listening sessions, bringing people in for actual direct conversation, and to show the diversity and breadth of the community and ideas is always a helpful way to do it.
So we have another text question. Despite many nonprofit organizations and many collaborations, our workforce development ecosystem seems to miss the mark in terms of connecting enough workers to available jobs to effectively change poverty numbers. You've talked to a number of leaders here. What's your diagnosis? No pressure.
Money in the system. I will say that first and foremost, this is a very under-resourced system. We all love to talk about workforce development. Everyone loves workforce development. The US spends less than 1% of our gross national product on investing in workforce, much less than other developed nations. So it's an under-resourced system. It has a very big, ambitious goal of connecting employers and workers and facilitating the creation of good jobs and getting people into good jobs, but it's hardly ever able to fully do that and realize its potential because it has not had enough resources to do it. That being said, I think it's the full ecosystem. Again, community colleges, the elementary, secondary education system, other institutions of higher education all play critical roles in shoring up and supporting this ecosystem. Labor unions, many of them have very strong training programs. They should be part of this mix. And it has to be done in coordination with employers to really understand what local economic needs are, as well as communities to make sure it's really creating jobs that meet the needs of the community as well. So there is a way to do this, but it does require resources, time, and coordination. And again, why coalitions matter. You need to bring a coalition to go forward to the state to unlock more Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act dollars. Go to the federal government, meet with members of Congress to advocate for more resources. What's actually interesting during this time with the Investing in America investments is that many employers are recognizing the need for workforce development. And sadly, when Build Back Better didn't pass, the big workforce development investments that we had included in Build Back Better got left on the cutting room floor. So it's an opportunity to make the case. And I think that there are many employers who are receptive who can join your coalition to go make these asks.
Okay, here's another one from our text machine out there. I'm really interested in how you talked about one of the important elements for coalition building is finding a way to navigate disagreement. Could you speak more about that and ways for coalition members to bridge differences of opinion?
Absolutely. I mean, this is why trust building matters, and a coalition isn't going to form overnight. Groups are made up of people. And it takes time for people to build relationships and build trust, and that translates across organizations. So, and being clear about where you stand and who you're representing and what the needs are. Some of the most effective coalitions I've been part of, after they have come together and continued building a shared agenda, they often develop agreements on how they will disagree. If there is a policy fight that they're part of, or they're asking for something, and only part of the group gets it, what are they going to do? So this often happens with community benefit agreements. A business decides that it's going to negotiate with labor, but not with community. Well, here's a chance for labor to say, okay, we want to be able to take advantage of this agreement with this employer, but this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to make sure we keep pushing for the community side, the community demands. But all of that should be negotiated ahead of time. There should be no surprises. People should know how they're going to show up, how they're going to respond, no backroom deals. So that's all part of trust building, and it does happen, but it requires relationship building and that trust building and developing a shared agenda.
So your final text question, it says, can we get a shout out to the Worker Center here in Cleveland? It is a grassroots organization that is working hard to represent those who aren't unionized. How do you see the roles of these centers as labor unions are fending off increased attacks?
Oh, I love that question, and want to give Grace a big shout out there. Grace, of course, is with the Northeast Ohio Worker Center. Worker centers are key. Worker centers are critical. They are not unions, so you need both. You need to have a strong, organized labor union, but you also need to have worker centers in the mix, because worker centers often represent workers who can't unionize because of our antiquated labor laws, and often represent communities that don't have voices. And so they need to be part of the mix, because they are often workers who have very low wage jobs. And part of this should not be only about transitioning people into these new sectors. All of that's important. We want more people to go into the clean energy and manufacturing sector. But we know from the pandemic, again, many service sector jobs are critical. They were essential jobs. They need to be made better. So job quality actually matters. And that's a big piece that worker centers bring to the forefront, fighting to make sure existing jobs are good jobs, and then making sure that future jobs are also good jobs. So thank you for letting me end on such an excellent question and a shout out to worker centers.
Thank you so much to Pronita Gupta for joining us at the City Club today. Forums like this one are made possible thanks to generous support from individuals like you. You can learn more about how to become a guardian of free speech at cityclub.org. Today's forum is in partnership with the Deaconess Foundation as part of its 4th annual Deborah Vesy Systems Change Champion Award, which was presented to Collaborate Cleveland earlier this morning. Congrats again to Abby Westbrook and your team for that great award. Please, a round of applause. We would also like to welcome guests at the tables hosted by the Cleveland Cuyahoga Workforce Development Board, Collaborate Cleveland, Deaconess, the Ohio Guidestone Workforce 360, the Centers, Towards Employment, and Youth Opportunities Unlimited. Thank you all for being here today. Up next at the City Club on Friday, November 1st, we will host our 2024 annual meeting. Dale England, Director of Press Forward, will be in conversation with the City Club's Dan Moulthrop, talking about the state of free speech, the news industry, and access to information across all of our communities. And then on Friday, November 8th, Congresswoman Shontel Brown and Congressman Max Miller will share the stage and sit down to discuss the election's outcome and the work ahead for the next Congress. WKYC's Russ Mitchell will moderate. You can get tickets to each of these forums and learn about all of the others at cityclub.org. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you once again to our guests, and I'm Cynthia Connolly, and our forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.